Hello folks, my name's David and you're watching Saving Time. Now in front of us is my Zenith Sport, and this one is particularly interesting because the movement was probably produced by Blancpain. It was the dial on this watch that really first attracted me to it. The patina on it is gorgeous. Now it dates from about 1940s and there's a lot wrong with it. So I'm going to do a few sweeps and pans here across the case, which is the biggest problem with this watch. As you can see, it's very pitted, it's very broken. It's going to take a lot of work to bring this one back up together. So I'm going to zoom in for some close shots now, and you can really get to see that damage. So this one's going to require some heavy restoration work. Now when it comes to restoration work, I prefer to go light-handed. So I won't be restoring this back to perfectly pristine. I will, however, be restoring it back to wearable condition. But look at that dial there. That's what really attracted me to this watch. Now, some of you may find that a more mint dial is more to your taste, but for me, I love that aged patina. Now, luckily enough for us on this watch, even though the case is completely trashed and the dial is either superb or not good enough, depending on how you look at it, the movement itself is quite good condition. Even the hairspring here looks to be okay. We're going to find out later, a bit of a spoiler, that it's not really up to task, but the rest of the movement, it looks okay, but you know, who knows what we're going to find inside that, considering all the damage to the outside. Now, this is the bezel off the watch. You can see it's also in bad shape. The good news is, though, our case back looks fine. So I'm going to go ahead and start by removing our, well, hands or hand here. This is a partial hour hand we have, which was pretty much all that came with the watch. The second hand looks fine. Now, these are blued hands. So I am going to probably get a set of replacements, either original Zenith or find something that's similar and then hand blue them myself. Our second hand here is still intact though. Although on this shot you can see there's a big hair poking out from where that second hand would be. And just the pressure of the piece of paper going underneath popped it off. This watch was wound. It did tick very intermittently. I tried it on a time grapher and it genuinely wasn't good enough to give a reading. So I'm going to pull a massive hair out of the second hand hole here, and that could have been what was binding it up. It's difficult to say, but where there's one huge, unsightly blemish, there's probably another. Now I'm going to push the set lever and pull the crown and winding stem out, and as you can see, that's mostly rust, so that will probably have to be replaced. Well, you never know your luck, it might clean up. After we pulled out the hair and give the watch a bit of a nudge, it did start ticking. Again, it has ticked intermittently. It'll probably stop again in a minute. And for some reason, the movement screws, which you can see here, were not screwed into the case at all. They were just left all loosey-goosey. I know if some other watchmaker has had a go at trying to make this thing run and called it a bit of a failure, which might not bode well for us. But also, these movement screws don't look like the right ones. I'm going to try putting the movement screw back in to make sure it does fit. In this case, it does. It's a little strange that it's just left protruding out there, but you can also see on one of the lugs in that shot that it's nearly worn all the way through. There you go. That lug up there is almost too poor to use. So I'm going to remove the dial from the watch, as I showed you there, some little dial feet around the outside of the movement. Just take that dial off. I'm going to put it in a box. It's almost certainly radioactive paint that was used on there, so I don't really want that just hanging around on my bench. The other half would kill me if I irradiated the house. So before I get this guy into a movement holder, I'm just going to take a look at some of the, well, as you can see, it's not in excellent condition. There's another hair there wrapped around the second hand. I'm going to remove the hour wheel here just so it doesn't fall off when I get this thing in a movement holder. So for all of you non-watchmakers out there, I'd like to give you a sense of scale before we continue on this watch. So this is one of the screws from the movement. I didn't purposefully pick a small one. This is around a medium-sized screw. So when you see these, they're under very heavy magnification. Now I'm going to start by removing our balance here. I'm going to remove it because I don't like it in the watch when I'm working on the watch, because it can get damaged very easily, that hairspring being very, very delicate. So that comes out. It's one of the first things I do Now on the balance cock there is a little gap so you can get your screwdriver in to lever it out, and you want to be very careful taking that out as not to damage that very delicate spring. I'll store this by simply flipping it upside down and keeping it under a glass container. So our balance is out. Now I've noticed a little bit of kind of residue. It might be, or might be rust even on our ratchet wheel here. So I'm going to use a little bit of pegwood, and this is wood without sap, basically wood that's been dried for a long time, I believe. Don't use a toothpick for this, you'll leave sap on it. Now I'm going to wind the power out the watch by moving the click there and letting the spring unwind. Now I did this off camera, but that's how I normally do it. I just put a screwdriver in the ratchet wheel, move the click aside and let it unwind. Now I'm going to start the disassembly process here by removing the click, specifically because I'm kind of interested how Zenith did their click spring. So you'll notice that that just went for a complete burn right off the end. Now we did save it, but the reason for that is that the spring was still holding tension on the click, the part I just removed. So when I went near it with the screwdriver, it burst onto the desk. So something to be aware of. Now I'm going to undo the ratchet wheel. Okay, now the crown wheel. I'm undoing both of these before taking one out because they're interfaced together. I find it sometimes easier to remove the wheels after both screws have been removed. Now on our crown wheel there, you would notice that it was reverse threaded, so I had to undo it the opposite way. So our ratchet wheel comes off. We can see our click spring. Our crown wheel comes off, and you can see that that's actually in 3 pieces. There's a piece underneath it, the small washer, but there was also a piece within the wheel itself that will come out later to be cleaned. So now I'm going to have to deal with a spring, and these little buggers will blast off into outer space, so I like to keep a piece of plastic sheeting over the top. It's more difficult to work through with the tweezers, but it saves your bacon. Well, it's mine at any rate. Maybe if you're a little more skilled than I am, you can do it without this, but I like to use a piece of pegwood and the plastic sheet just to stop that spring shooting off into the stratosphere. So I'm going to remove the bridge that's holding our barrel here, so the barrel bridge, and 3 screws for this one, I believe. It's also a very pretty movement. Now it has been fully gold plated. That's what you're seeing. That's not brass, that's fully gold plate. So you'll see me throughout the course of this video try and use bronze, brass tweezers wherever possible, as it saves scratches. Now you can still scratch it, of course, you still have to be very careful, but I don't want to be the one that puts a large scratch across the surface of this beautiful, beautiful movement. Now, fun fact for you, Zenith are credited with the creation of the first automatic chronograph, the Zenith El Primero, which beat at 36,000 VPH, meaning it had an accuracy of 1/10 of a second. This movement, the Zenith El Primero movement, was used by Rolex in 1988 to create the Rolex Daytona reference 16520. This one only had a 2800 VPH, a 28,000 VPH movement in it, however. But if you bought a Rolex Daytona in the 80s all the way up to probably the 90s, you were buying a Zenith El Primero movement. The history of the first automatic chronograph is actually fairly fascinating, with many companies that kind of can almost lay claim to being the first. This is including Seiko and a corporation of companies including Breitling and Buren. Buren being one of my favourite watch manufacturers, so stay tuned for some more from them. Now our barrel bridge is off, and I'm just going to undo our set lever here. That was kind of stuck in there. Now I'm going to take our train bridge off, which holds our wheel train, our train of wheels. So a couple of screws on this one, and again I have to give props to Zenith here. These bridges have been beveled, as you can see, meaning they catch the light very nicely. Now the gold plating would have been for corrosion purposes and to make the movement look nice. Considering the display case back wasn't a thing, it's really nice to see that they had this much pride in their own work. So final screw coming loose here, and you can see one of those slots where you can put a screwdriver and lever this up. You want to be very careful, or at least I do, with these bridges, because it's very easy to bend a pivot. So all those little wheels have pivots on top which sit in the jewels within that balance. So Jewels being much frictionless practically, as opposed to metal on metal contact, which tends to wear. Now I'm going to take out the sliding and winding pinion here. So there comes the winding pinion. That was completely jammed in there with old oil. Now, as you can see, the old oil dried on the surface. It's one of the biggest things or contributors, aside from magnetism, that keeps these watches from running, is the oil that was used in them dries out. So it was a non-synthetic oil. We use synthetic oils now, which last a little longer than their organic counterparts. So pallet bridge coming off now, which will unfortunately have the pallet fork stuck to it. So you can see just how much oil has dried there by the fact the components are getting stuck together at this point. So that bridge and the pallet forks coming with it. Now I'm going to remove the pallet fork from the bridge, of course, so it can be properly cleaned. And again, you want to use a steady hand with this. You do not want to bend the pivot that's in there. So this just leaves us to disassemble the trainer wheels here. So this is the escape wheel. And you'll see now comes out the fourth wheel, which will actually have a very long pivot on it, kind of difficult to pull out. And the reason the pivot on this wheel is so long is the second hand is connected directly to it. So our third wheel coming out here. There we go, easy enough. Our second wheel won't come out, so this is the barrel complete here. This has got the spring in it, the bit that powers the watch, also known as the first wheel. And the center wheel there, second wheel, also known as, now won't come out because it's connected on the dial side via that cannon pinion, the thing I'm pointing at now. And that's press fit on, so we need a special tool to take that off. So I'm going to start disassembling the dial side of the watch now, which contains the keyless and motion works. The keyless works allowing you to wind the watch. Now you'll see me here stabbing my tweezers into a bit of what's called pith wood. This is a very, very soft wood, and it's a very good way to remove dirt and oil from your movement, from your tools, sorry, not your movement. It can also be used to clean oil off the surface of movements. So I'm going to disassemble the cover plate that's bridging the keyless and motion work. And then I'm once again going to put a little piece of plastic over this so I can remove the yoke spring. And even with the plastic on there, it still managed to get away, but because of the plastic, it just fell by the side of the table. So our yoke is now coming out. That's a little bit stuck on there, again due to dry oil a lot of the time. Now there's a little spring that holds our set-in lever down. So that's going to come out. This one's not too springy, so I don't need to use plastic for it. It just provides a little tension. It's more of a little tension bar than a spring. The last parts of our keyless works coming out. The intermediate setting wheel is coming out. Then the minute wheel can come out. And finally, the cannon pinion can be removed. Now, I have a very cheap Chinesium cannon pinion remover. Hoping to upgrade to a better one, but it does the job. So there you go. You can see those tools often sold as hand removers. I prefer to use hand levers, but you know, they will work. They'll also work as cannon pinion removers. Now removing the cannon pinion has allowed our center wheel or second wheel to drop free, and there you can have a quick look at it. So the last thing to do is remove this plate that holds the dual and Incabloc setting, Incabloc being an anti-shock setting, for the bottom of the balance pivot. So that comes out fairly easily. Now, I'm going to give this watch a little clean with a piece of pegwood, because even though it's going into an ultrasonic cleaner, there's some really caked on dirt here and bits I really don't like the look of. So this will allow me to give the watch a little clean. There's another fun fact with Zenith. The El Primero was actually launched in 1969, which was exactly the date the first quartz movements went out to retail. So it was heralded as a technological marvel at a time when mechanical watches were very much on the outs. So kind of a bit ironic there for Zenith that they managed it just on the same year that almost ended their business. So as you can see, I cut pegwood in various different shapes to just try and get some of this off the surface. Now I'm not going to show you all of this because it would take too long, but I spent 10-15 minutes here with my pegwood, pegging the jewels, so just making sure there's no old residual oil in the jewels, and then going into my ultrasonic cleaner. Now, I don't have actual images of the watch in the cleaner, but I use Elmer waterless cleaning solutions for all of my watch cleaning. Basic jam jars, little steel mesh doohickeys, as you can see, to keep the parts nice and organized. And here we are back from the cleaner. So the cleaning of this is not very exciting. Hoping to get a watch cleaner at some point, but that will be for future videos. Now, as you can see, the cleaner did a wonderful job. Even the ultrasonic did fine. And I'm going to start by reassembling the gear train here. Now, that wheel is the one with a very long pivot. That wheel will be directly connected to our second hand. So there's the fourth wheel going in. The intermediate wheel here, third wheel, is going to go in. So these can be a little fiddly. Getting the bridge on top of these is also a little fiddly. So that's our center wheel. Now I'm going to give this a drop of oil. I'm not going to show all of the oiling on camera. As I've said in these videos before, the oiling can be a little fiddly to do. It requires very close magnification, and I don't actually have the technology at the moment to be able to film that. So you'll be getting some oiling, but not all of it. I apologize for that. I shall try and do a little better in the future. So the last wheel I'm going to put in here is the escape wheel, which is part of the escapement, of course. And here goes the bridge for our train of wheels. So this bridge is holding the escape wheel, the fourth wheel, and the third wheel. So this is a very fiddly procedure. You might see pivots coming in and out of those jewels. There's actually holes in the top of those jewels, if you weren't aware, that the pivots will go through for a frictionless fit. So I'm going to making this look easy with the edit. It is not. This took me a good 5-10 minutes at least. This bridge was specifically fiddly, and you really have to avoid the temptation of just, giving it a bit of force. You can't put any force on it at all. Pegwood, I'm not really pushing down a lot. It's very, very light pressure. And you can see now all three pivots through all three jewels. This is what you need to see before you tighten that down. Now you can even move the wheels to make sure they're all rotating freely, which I'm sure I did, but I'm not showing it here on camera. But you really need to double check that all three pivots are visible through all three jewels. Because if you just tighten this sucker down, you're going to bend those pivots, and you're going to have to be a better watchmaker to me than I am to bend those back true again. So just screw the bridge down again after double checking that it's all running freely. It's also worth noting at this point that this watch is very, very well made. If you hadn't realized already, this is a joy to work on. It's a pleasure to look at and also a joy to work on. Now I'm going to put the set lever in here. You'll notice it's got a little too much oil in it. Like I said, I was doing some oiling off camera. In this case, it's not critical though. So the barrel complete is going back in. Now I wound and oiled this off camera. I have recently acquired some antique watch winders, so hopefully I'll be showing that process a little bit more in depth on the next video. So the barrel bridge is going on. Now that also holds our center wheel there. Now this one is quite easy to fit, that center wheel pivot being huge. A little bit of oil for the center wheel pivot. And if you get any oil on top, you want to come in with a piece of rudder coat, which is like watchmaker's blue tack, and just get that off, because it attracts, well, no, it doesn't attract, but it allows dirt and hair to get stuck in there, and you don't want that. So a little bit of rudder coat just to get that excess oil off. So I'm now going to hold the bridge in place and spin the wheels just to make sure that everything at this point is running well before I go ahead and screw it down together. So yeah, I love to see those wheels moving extremely freely. Almost no pressure at all needs to be exerted to make that happen. Because the mainspring of a watch has to power a watch for an extended period of time, normally around 40 to 50 hours, you can't have high torque. So if it really takes any force at all to spin those wheels, something has gone very wrong. So I'm just going to screw the bridge down here. This being quite a tall movement. These are quite tall screws. And as I said before, very, very nice movement, very nice fit and finish to it. So as soon as this bridge is back on and screwed down, we'll be able to get the crown wheel back on, the ratchet wheel back on, the click and the click spring. So again, we're going to have to be a bit careful with the click spring to make sure that it doesn't shoot off into outer space. I think the first video I did on the channel has some great examples of me losing springs over the other side of the room, if you want to check that out. And once again, you can see there that those wheels run freely. Now I'm going to get that little metal washer on there that's for our crown wheel, and I'm going to do a little bit of oiling. So I use synthetic oils for all of my stuff, Mobius, various grades. I can probably link them in the comments down below. If I forget, do remind me. But yeah, so I use Swiss synthetic oils all around, really fairly industry standard stuff. So that wheel is going to go back on now, our crown wheel, and there we go. As I said, everything fits in this watch. It's very easy to work on. It's one of those terrible things. Now, I noticed a little bit of rust on the crown wheel screw here, so I'm going to just use a piece of pegwood and try and polish that off a little bit. Now, unfortunately, this shot doesn't show it, but it does polish up rather nicely. So one of the ironies for me in watchmaking is I started fixing the cheaper stuff. Just made sense to me. I didn't want to destroy anything that was like really pretty. And that was more difficult to fix than these types of movements. So it'll probably happen to you as well if you decide to teach yourself. But yeah, you end up in a situation where you're learning on stuff that's harder than the stuff you actually progress to. So I'm going to oil this pallet fork here now. Apologies for my hand being in the way, but you will see the dot of oil on there at some point. My excellent editing skills in play here. And then I'm going to put the pallet fork back in before I continue to rebuild the top of the barrel bridge. And the reason for this is as soon as I've rebuilt that barrel bridge, the wheels will spin freely, and I don't want them to. So putting the pallet fork in will lock them in place. Now I'm using a piece of pithwood here to clean the pallets on pivots. Sorry, not the pallets. The pivot on the pallet fork there. This will help reduce any old dried oil. Now it has been through the cleaner, but again, you can't be too careful. So I'm just going to get that pallet fork in place, and this will just lock the wheels from spinning, as I said. So, you know, best practice to probably have it in place. And I like to do everything as carefully as I can, or at least as carefully as I know how. Now, do point out to me in the comments if I'm doing something wrong. I am more of a watch collector than a watchmaker, as I've mentioned on previous videos. This is not my full-time profession. This is my hobby. I hope to get better at it. And one of the reasons I like to do these videos for YouTube is the videos capture a multitude of sins. So, you know, they've really helped me progress to become a better watchmaker, or better than I was. Not in particularly superb, but at least better than I used to be. So please do comment. If you see me do anything wrong, I'm a big lad. I can take it. I would welcome the feedback, especially from my more experienced community members, because I'm sure there are some of you out there. So I'm just going to screw down the pallet bridge here. That will keep the pallet fork in place, and that will stop all the real wheels rotating around when I put the ratchet wheel on here. So the click spring has to go first, of course, because it's under the other two wheels. And again, I'm going to use the piece of plastic trick because it's great if you're more of a novice watchmaker like me. The pithwood makes another appearance, so I can clean my tweezers. But as I was saying, the plastic is great if you're a bit more of a novice like me. It just gives you that extra layer of protection that perhaps a professional wouldn't need. Although I have watched some excellent repair videos on YouTube by what I consider to be top flight watchmakers, and springs still spring away with the greatest of ease to them too, so I don't feel too bad about it. Now you can see I tried to clean the rust off the ratchet wheel here. I think I might have done a little more harm than good with this one. It doesn't really show in the picture, but there was a very obvious spot of rust or some debris, some staining on the wheel. Now you can see it on video along with some extra scratches I introduced, but to the naked eye it's not there. So that wheel spins freely at the moment. You can't use it to wind the watch because, of course, the click is not there. So the click is what holds the ratchet wheel in place. It's also what makes the clicking noise. If you've ever wound a mechanical watch, the click acts as a ratchet. So if you ever wound a mechanical watch and you hear that click, 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 click when you wind it, that would be the click doing its job. If the click wasn't there, it wouldn't be possible to wind the watch. So you can see now when I wind the watch, the power cannot come out of the watch because the click there holds it in place. So you can see I've added a little bit of power to the watch, which now means I should be able to move the pallet fork slightly and it should jump from side to side. So I'm also doing this to distribute the oil that I put on that lead pallet fork there. I will then oil the pallet fork again. I'll probably flip this 5 times, oil the fork, flip it 5 times, oil the fork, flip it 5 times and oil the fork. Unfortunately, I need much heavier magnification for that, which brings us to the dial side. So I'm going to start by, when I say I need heavier magnification, I mean I do have it, but I just can't film it. So I'm going to start by putting the cannon pinion back on. You want to get this on before the other wheels because you have to press fit it on, use quite a bit of force. If you have the other wheels in place, there's a good chance you'll press fit that down and shear one of the teeth off the other wheels. So again, I'm showing a little bit of oiling here, not all of it by all means, as this video is already sort of long enough. Now I'm going to oil this pivot here in the jewel. Also, I'm going to oil the jewel, which will in turn leave a little reservoir of oil. That would be our intermediate wheel there, third wheel that we just oiled in the jewel. And the reason I'm oiling that one now is because I'm about to slap a wheel down over the top of it and it'll be more difficult to access. So our intermediate setting gear goes in there. That's sort of a bridge between our keyless and motion works. Our minute wheel goes on top, and you can see that would make that jewel awkward to oil. So a little bit of oil around the keyless works. Again, I'm using various different grades of oil and even some Mobius 8200 grease for the keyless works. For the heavy metal on metal contact, you're going to want a heavier grease. So just rebuild the keyless works. And as I mentioned earlier, the keyless works, so called because you don't need a key to wind the watch. Back in the day, you would have done, and in some cases, 2 keys, one to wind the watch and one to set the watch. The keyless works was invented by a couple of different people, notably Breguet sort of refined it quite a bit, as well as did some other large watch houses. Jaeger-LeCoultre also had a hand in the modern keyless works. It's just very convenient not having to carry a couple of keys around. So our keyless works are being rebuilt. I'm just putting some oil on the back of our winding pinion. Our sliding pinion or yoke was the part that just got oiled and went in. For those of you playing along at home and want to know what all these various parts are called, it's worth noting as well, you might have heard different watchmakers refer to them with different names. This is because there's various traditions, watchmaking, German, French, English, Swiss, and the names are derived from several different languages, from several different traditions. So for instance, the sliding pinion, which is the bit that this yoke is going to interface to, is has many names, as do most of the parts. So if you hear another watchmaker calling them differently, they're not wrong, probably. They're probably just using a different name for the same part. It does make sourcing watch parts quite difficult also. A yoke spring is going in right now. So again, this spring is a little bugger. It will pop out. This is one of the ones that's really under tension. So again, plastic bag trick. Bit of pegwood this time, just because I've got the feeling this one might fly on me even with that. Now, I've edited this to make it look easier than it is. I've always said on these videos and on this channel in particular that I'm not going to edit things to make it look like I'm better than I am, but I am going to edit things to take the tedium out for you. So I'm sure you didn't want to sit there and watch me for 4 minutes go backwards and forwards for that. And before you remove that plastic bag and your pegwood, you really want to make sure that everything is in the correct place, because I've had this before. I thought it was good, and then one part was slightly loose, and I've breathed too heavily over the piece, and everything's gone poof and gone, disappeared. You wait in a month for spare parts. So I'm going to bring in the cover plate that's got an integrated spring on it also. Luckily enough, this one's not too springy, and I want to get that cover plate down as quickly as possible because it's covering the spring. So the less time I leave that spring under tension and exposed, the happier a chap I will be. So we have flipped the watch over to the back side again. This would be the back that you would see if you had a display case back. And the only thing left on this watch now is to put the balance back in. So I'm going to put the balance back in, being extremely careful of that hairspring. Okay, and this is a very, very tricky maneuver. You really want to take your time with this. This is where people like me can really come a cropper. Now you can see that does spin, but the amplitude looks very, very low to my eye, and very, very low. And you'll notice that the hairspring seems to be touching. Now there can be several reasons for this. It could have been magnetized, it could have not been cleaned very well, and there could just be some oil sticking it together. So there's about to be a confession time for me, because I took this thing into another room to put it on a time grapher, and I tripped. There's no other way to say it. I tripped over my own feet and didn't so much drop this watch on the floor as launched it into the ground. So the confession is not really that I'm clumsy, it's that I've been editing this video out of order. I actually started on the case, which turned out to be a bit stupid because I ended up with parts that needed replacing. So I've had a watch sitting on the counter for a month. So I'm going to go back to the order in which we filmed in and show you how I refurbished the case, and we're going to come back to the movement after that. Sorry for delaying you there. Right, so I'm going to use a sanding stick. This is 600, 1200 and 3000 grit. We will come back to the watch. You will see it on my wrist, I promise you. But first, the case. So there's no magic to this. It's literally just sanding. You can do this by machine, although I tend to find that rounds over the edges. But with this level of damage, we are never going to get the sharp, crisp edges the case originally had. And you are going to see me do a lot of sanding here. Now, the reason I've chosen to put so much of the sanding in, at first I was going to just show this and then show you the final result. But a new phenomenon has occurred on YouTube. I don't know if it's new or simply new to me, which is the fake restoration video. Ever since I've been putting out these kind of watch repair restoration videos, I've started to see videos with millions of views that incredibly obviously have been faked. Like, I've seen watches, sort of Rolex Daytonas, that somebody found in the woods under a bush. Like, who goes walking in the woods with their $20,000 wristwatch, drops it on the floor, and then goes, whoops, I think I'll just leave it there and get another one on the way home? So I am aware that these fake restoration videos exist. I'm not naming any names. Like, they look fake to me. Maybe they're not. Maybe people do drop watches in garbage bins. It's a new one on me, but maybe that's a thing that happens. Like, who takes their Patek Philippe to a swamp bog and then drops it? I don't know, but apparently it happens. So I decided to show you that I'm actually putting the work in here. This is not me showing you a terrible case on the thumbnail and then licking it twice with a bit of sandpaper for visual effect and then pulling a new case out of my bottom drawer. This case is actually being refurbished, which is the reason why I'm showing you all these steps. Now, this case is so bad that I've actually gone down to some 400 grit. I don't mind scratches on a case, and when this refurbishment is done, there are still going to be some scratches on mine. This is a 70-80-year-old watch, and in my estimation, it should look like a 70-80-year-old watch. But the pitting here is all the way down to the base metal. It's actually going to degrade severely over time. It's not good to leave it like this. So I'm going to bring it back to a wearable condition where no more damage is going to be done to it. So you can see the difference between the two lugs already after a little bit of sanding. And again, there is no magic to this. I think the whole process took me a day. So if you don't really love the watch, or you don't have a lot of free time, you might want to reconsider this. You know, if you've got your eye on something, I'm just going to tell you now that this is quite a lengthy, labor-intensive process. Here's the watch after a couple of hours of careful sanding. So you can see this would be wearable to my eye. Now I'm going to get it better than this. And I'm going to go to a machine at some point as well. But let's just take in a look at the difference between now and before. Now you can see the lugs are slightly rounded over. I'm going to get those back to more of a point. This is just a halfway intermediate point to show you guys that I did not go out and buy another one of these and just go ta-da. I also did not find this watch in a trash heap by the side of the road or buried in a wood or in a river. I purchased it with my own money. So another problem with this thing is if you look at our lugs, the metal has worn almost all of the way out in some. So I'm going to use a little bit of solder just to build up a little bit more metal on the back side of these lugs. That will give them some more structural stability, and I won't have to worry about this thing going flying off my wrist. Now, a better way to do this might be with copper solder, but that lies beyond the bounds of my experience. So I'm using just regular tin solder here. So the metal being put on here is tin. So that should hold it. Now I'm going to add a little more metal to the other one, even though it hasn't worn all the way through and quite yet, it's very, very close to it. So I want to just preempt that by adding a little more metal. And then obviously I'm going to have to sand that down and shape it back into the right shape. Now that's never going to be perfect or pristine, but this is really a rescue job. As I say, this thing was unwearable. If it had just had a little bit of damage, I don't mind minor damage. You can see the metal build up around the lug there to save us from our spring bar just popping out. So here's the case. You can see it. You might be able to see it. It shines a little golden. We are down to the base metal. It's just very polished, so it looks silver. It looks more gold in real life. Maybe the color grade of the video is not excellent. Not really my forte so much. And I'm going to use a machine. This is a Proxon. It's just basically a Proxon in a drill press holder, turned sideways with some various different polishing compounds, polishing buffers. I don't use diamond polishing paste for this, just bog standard polishes. I'll link down below again which ones I use. I don't have any affiliate links, so buy them wherever you like. I'll probably link to where I live in the Czech Republic right now, so that's probably not the best option for a lot of you guys anyway. So again, I'm very heavily speeding this up, and this is kind of a leather thing here, just trying to take the polish off. And we're going to go from here onto some electroplating. Now, you will notice there are still a couple of blemishes in this watch. And as I said at the start, or I've mentioned, I hope, that I do not want to get this perfect. I do not want an 80-year-old watch that looks like it just rolled off a production line. Now, I'm going to throw this thing back into the ultrasonic cleaner. And when it comes out the ultrasonic cleaner, I'm going to shove it in some what's called Plater's Pickle, which is fairly dilute hydrochloric acid in this case. Now I'm going to leave it in there for a few minutes, and then I'm going to copper plate it. Now this might sound strange, but it's called a copper strike, so it will be a very thin layer of copper plating before I do the nickel plating. Now I really like the way this looks. The final nickel seems to be a little brighter to me, and it's a common technique. So is it necessary? I'm not entirely sure, but it certainly helps me see any defects in the final plate, and it's a small extra step to take as I'm electroplating anyway. So I'm going to wash the watch as well when it comes out the Plater's Pickle in distilled water, which is what it's in right now, because obviously you don't want to be mixing hydrochloric acid with your other solutions. So it's just copper sulfate solution, basically. This one was homemade. I'm not going to go into too much of the electroplating process, but basically I've got on the negative terminal, I've got the thing that needs to be plated, which in this case would be our watch. And on the positive terminal, on the anode terminal, I've got a bar of pure 100% copper. I think this is 99.9%, but close enough. And this will transfer copper from the positive to the negative and allow us to copper plate this watch. Now I'm running this at very, very low current, about 200 milliamps. So you're going to want a current limiting power supply for this. I built mine, but they're available for sale pretty much everywhere. They're not that expensive. So this is really not that difficult to do. So this is time lapsed. I was hoping you'd be able to see the copper go onto the watch. But because of the blue liquid, it just always looks silver. I don't know why. You'll see me take this out in a minute and it will go to that lovely coppery color. But my camera work on this has not been the best. Again, hoping to improve with videos. So you can see that's been copper striked. There is a fairly decent layer of copper on that. Now I'm going to leave it in for a little bit longer. I think in total I left the copper layer for about 15 minutes. This is a little bit more art than science, or at least at the level I do it at. I'm sure industrial plating is more science, but for me, I kind of go by feel and how much amperage I'm putting in. Now, I keep mine low. You don't want bubbles forming on the surface of the object. You can use a surfactant to stop that as well, something like sodium lauryl sulfate, but if you keep the amperage low, you won't need to. Now, here's the bezel after I've removed it and polished it a little bit. Now, I'm not happy with this bezel at all, so I'm going to repolish that and have another go at it, basically. I'm going to replate the bezel separately after I've given it a little bit more of a sand down. So now the copper strike layer is done. We're going to go once again into the plater's pickle. And I have not too much experience with plating, but if anyone's really interested, drop me a note in the comments. I guess I could do a more in-depth look at electroplating a watch from start to finish, how to set up the power supply, what I'm using exactly, what ratios and stuff. I'm not sure if that's going to be of interest to too many people, so please do let me know if that's something you'd want to see or not. Now, I'm going into a nickel solution here, and on the positive this time is a solid nickel anode, which I picked up from my local jewelry store. Now, again, the same procedure. It's going to be in for about 15-20 minutes. I couldn't tell you exactly how thick the plating is. It's probably somewhere around 20 microns, which is what they used to use in the good old days for gold plating before they got too cheap. But you can see as I pull this out, it goes from copper to nickel, which is what we want. This was originally, of course, a nickel-plated watch. So the time lapse is not too exciting, because I'm trying to show you nothing's happening, and it's kind of awkward to show people that nothing is happening because, well, it's kind of uninteresting. But this is time-lapsed and then slowed down when I pull the watch out, or at least parts of it are time-lapsed. So again, I took it in there for about 15 to 20 minutes. Now, please also do let me know. I try to keep the level of detail in these videos kind of consistent, but if you want more information or less, just let me know in the comments, because I'm still new to this YouTubing business. So you can see our watch there is getting its final dunking, and I'll pull it out. You can see it's gone very silver. It'll be a matte silver when it comes out. Now, you need to polish that to get it to a bright silver, but this is indeed what's called a bright nickel solution. So you can see some bits at the back are not as nice as the bits on the front. That's because I took less care and attention to the sanding process at the back of the watch, and obviously where the case back snaps on, you don't want to sand that, otherwise, well, you'll be in a world of trouble. So let's go back to the movement. Now, I ended up having to buy a new balance complete for this watch. I don't know what was wrong with the original one, whether it was magnetized, it was dirty, but after I launched it into the floor, it was certainly unusable. So a new one was needed, cost about $90 US, and here it is of the watch. I'm going to add just a little bit of power to the watch, and you should see it spring up immediately. So as you can see, this is the same watch. You can see the same scratches. It's the same everything, just that balance complete, as I showed you, got repurchased because, well, I'm a bit of an idiot and I tripped over my own feet and launched my own watch into the floor. But this thing is running beautifully now. I'm going to complete the oiling because I kind of love the Incabloc setting. It's a genius setting, it really is. Created by George Brunswick and Franz Marti in 1934. Without it, you often see bent pivot points on balances. In fact, you can see the pivot of our balance staff right there. Now, the setting comes apart in two pieces, the jewel and the one underneath, and this is going into some Bergeon B-dip, used to be called Bergeon 1-dip, and then a little bit of blotting paper. Now, I completely failed to get the oiling of this on camera properly, but I'm going to peg it with a little bit of pegwood just to make sure there's no oil on it, put a little bit of oil on it, and obviously my close-up work there was not the best, and then drop the setting back in. Now you can close the little spring that holds it all together. And the reason for this setting is if you put like a metal pivot in a fixed point and the watch gets dropped or knocked, the pivot will bend and the watch won't keep good time. So this allows that pivot to absorb shock. Like I say, absolute stroke of genius there by those two fellas. Now I'm going to use a piece of pegwood to polish up my balance lever here, just because it's got a little bit of schmutz on it, and I don't want that. I want this to look as pretty as possible. So it's all these final steps that you need to take just to make sure everything is to your satisfactory standard. Now I'm going to use a bit of Radico here. Again, Watchmaker's Blue Tack, doesn't leave any residue behind. And you can see we managed to get that up to a mirror shine, so I'm quite happy with that. Now, this watch drops in the case front first, so excuse the dramatic cut there, but I really didn't want to show me undoing it from the movement holder. Basically, I've just put the dial back on to the movement. I'm going to put the second hand back on. That's the original second hand. And you should see that go on quite easily. Now, it is a very tiny hand, and I'm being as careful as possible not to slip with these tweezers and scratch the dial. But you can see that our second hand is on. Give that a little push down with a handset lever. And there we go. Now, I've had to buy other hands for this watch. My original purpose was to blue the hands. So you can do this yourself. It's not that complicated a procedure. There is some technique to it. But unfortunately for me, these hands were actually nickel plated, which means they're not going to blue very well, or not in my experience. You want steel to blue. So I can't blue these hands. I will do a follow-up video on this probably. I think hand bluing is quite interesting and should be quite interesting to a lot of people. Now this hand was a little off size, so I had to make the hole a little bigger there. And I'm just going to check that the hands go round and everything is set nicely. Now the hour hand is a little off here, but I do come back and fix that later. Now, as for the crystal on this watch, I bought two new ones here, one oversized and one small size, but I must have had a senior moment because neither of those fit. So this scratched old wretched crystal you see in front of you is one I had left in the drawer that I'd actually replaced on something else. Also, the crown from the old watch split. The crown itself is fine, but the winding stem split off in the crown. So I need to retrieve the original crown and put it back on this watch. But for right now, I want to get it on wrist. I want to live with it for a week or two, see if there's any problems. I want to put it on a time grapher just to show you guys what sort of accuracy it gained and how well we did with putting this thing back together, which I'm going to show you just in a second now. And then I'll get some beauty shots of it on wrist. So it's not perfect. It's more than good enough for an 8-year-old watch, however, and I think I'm going to pan the camera now just to make sure I'm not one of those channels that went to find the watch in the dustbin. And there is our Zenith, and I'll leave you with some beauty shots and whatever copyright-free music I can find here on YouTube. Also, if you made it this far, do me a favor and drop a like on the video if you liked it, a dislike if you didn't. Of course, that's also fine. Drop me a comment, let me know what you think. Feed the YouTube algorithm here so I can get seen by a few more people, if you wouldn't mind. I've been David, and this has been Saving Time. Thank you very much for watching.